All right, we will begin. Welcome to the Association of Catholic Publishers second webinar of the 2017 to 2018 season. This one on best practices for managing a publisher's social media content and presence. My name is Bruce Baumgarten. I've been asked by ACP to coordinate and host these events. And on behalf of the board of ACP and its executive director, Therese Brown, I bid you good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, if you happen to be joining us from far away or you just feel like it. A few housekeeping details, and then we will be introducing our presenter and getting along with it. As is standard with our webinars, participant audio and video is muted so that all the resources can be directed toward the presenter. When I'm not doing some questions and things, I will be muting my own audio and video as well. You are welcome to use the GoToWebinar control panel to either chat amongst yourselves or with me during the presentation. One of those little items on that control panel is chat. We'd like to ask you to use the chat panel to address any questions during the presentation. This has a couple of functions. One, if you use the chat panel, everyone can see the question, and then that way everyone can join in too. We can share knowledge, and people can maybe provide some answers themselves, as well as then I will be soliciting the questions at select points and then feeding them to our presenter so he can address any specific questions you'll have. Upon the completion of this webinar, the GoToWebinar application will automatically load a very short evaluation interest finder form. It's only 3 questions. We really ask you to take a moment to complete this so that we can constantly improve our product. The third question, in fact, on that interest finder will ask you to maybe name some additional topics regarding social media that could be addressed in future webinars. Maybe not on the exact topic of social media per se. You may have noticed that just last week, Pope Francis released the text for World Communications Day for this year. Each year there have been the celebration of World Communications Day in May, but it's usually in January that he releases it. And you may have seen it on the news, in fact, because it addressed the topic of truth and fake news, quote unquote. But he ended that with a kind of paraphrasing and adaptation of the prayer of St. Francis. And I'd like to invite us to make that our opening prayer. And feel free to speak right out in your office or cubicles or pray mentally, but let us pray this adaptation. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Help us to recognize the evil latent in a communication that does not build communion. Help us to remove the venom from our judgments. Help us to speak about others as brothers and sisters. You are faithful and trustworthy. May our words be seeds of goodness for the world. Where there is shouting, let us practice listening. Where there is confusion, let us inspire harmony. Where there is ambiguity, let us bring charity. Where there is exclusion, let us offer solidarity. Where there is sensationalism, let us use sobriety. Where there is superficiality, let us raise real questions. Where there is prejudice, let us awaken trust. Where there is hostility, let us bring respect. Where there is falsehood, let us bring truth. Amen. We'd like to begin first with your own information, your own experience. And so I'm going to launch a poll, or two quick polls. The first has to deal with how many channels of social media, for example, Facebook or Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, each of them a channel, you are active in, and it is collecting responses as we go in real time. Okay. 80% of participants have voted, 85%, 90%, almost there. Okay. What we have, nobody is without any social media presence. Wouldn't have expected to be here. 17% listed activity in one social media channel. 28% in 2 to 3. 33% in 4 to 6. And 22% in 7+. You see those results right there. I am sorry for that delay. So we have some very active people. Okay. I'm going to invite you to take one more. And this will get at your experience in your own kind of self-assessment. How effectively are you using social media in your organization? This would be a great sense for James to see what he's got ahead of him. Okay, 85% voted. Last couple people maybe. Okay, that's 1 minute. And close that, and we're going to share that. And you can see 11% not effective at all, 39% somewhat effective, 33% moderately effective, 17% very effective. So we have motivated learners. I always enjoy that. All right, thank you very much. And I'm going to make sure I move on here correctly. And I'd like to introduce our presenter. This is a bit of a different format. We are primarily going to take advantage of our presenter's expertise through an interview format. So let's welcome here. James Hetzel is the president and CEO of Trinity Road LLC, founded in 1997 as a multi-channel distributor of religious books and gifts. Trinity Road is now the largest internet distributor of Catholic books and gifts in the world. James is an active board member for numerous not-for-profit organizations. His effective use of the internet and social media has led to his participation on many multiple panel discussions and interviews. And he and his wife, Whitney, have 9 children. So, welcome, James. I've brought your mic up, so let's hope we can hear you.
Thank you, Bruce. We working?
We are working. Thank you for taking this time to begin. So, actually, expand on the introduction with a question. If you could tell us a little bit how you began using social media as a business tool, and how did that progress?
Well, first I'll say I think our company's name is Trinity Road, but I think people on the call probably know us as the Catholic Company. That is our primary web address, CatholicCompany.com, and that is our social media presence. I think we've probably progressed very similarly to the participants on the call. I thought the survey results were interesting. 33% are active on 4 to 6 channels, and that's exactly where we are as a company. So I'm right there with the participants on the call. 33% said they were using it moderately effectively, and that's where I would put ourselves. It was interesting to me that 17% said they're very effective. And I think you may want to send Bruce a message, because maybe we should get you as a participant on this call, because I feel like at this moment in time, I don't feel like we are very effective as a company. I think we're moderately effective. I think we used to be very effective, but the rules of the game have been changing so dramatically that I think it's hard for me to fully know exactly where we are at. So to Bruce's question, we probably started using social media about 7 or 8 years ago. At first, as much as anything as a placeholder, it was clear that Facebook primarily was getting increasing traction. And so we wanted to stake our claim in the ground. And so we started, putting up various posts. I think we were highly commercial in how we used it, very promotional at first, products that we were selling, reviews of products. And I think over time we've gotten less and less promotional and have really viewed it more as a brand building, and then as a community building within our follower base. The second part that has changed dramatically is when we started doing it, we really weren't advertising. You had a business page, and we would post, at first probably several times a week onto the business page, and then daily, and then several times a day. And then over the last 4 or 5 years, I think increasingly social media for us has been not just the organic postings that we put up for our followers, but it's actually advertising campaigns that we are paying for on several of the social media platforms. And again, up to this point, primarily Facebook, and to a lesser extent, Instagram. So I think 7, 8 years heavily on Facebook. Instagram and Pinterest have grown for us over the last couple of years. Twitter has always been a non-factor for us. We do post daily on there, but we do it through an automated posting where we're simply just cross-posting what we've put onto Facebook. And then we have a fairly active YouTube channel. So those are our primary things.
Well, thank you. I want to address a question right off the bat, because it's another thing that's been in the news lately. I mean, clearly, as you described, change is almost a constant, and we're gonna get to that a little bit more, because the change in platforms and popularity and trends and everything. But recently, Facebook announced some changes in the way that it was conducting business regarding organizational pages. Can you walk us through some of that information and what you know, and perhaps give us some direction on how it can affect our work? How is it going to affect what you do, and the change that they're trying to implement?
These changes really started a long time ago, and Facebook, just like Google, does not always tell you what they're doing. They're not telling you if there are changes to their algorithms. They don't tell you why. And so sometimes it can be very hard to figure out exactly what's happening. But this time, Facebook in the last several weeks has been very forthright that they are changing what users see in their news feeds. And they're putting more of an emphasis upon people you know rather than businesses that you interact with. We have seen this coming for a long time. Things, for example, we could post something, an article, say 2 years ago, and a very large percentage of our followers would see that article. And we have seen that dropping and dropping and dropping, that exposure. And our logic was really that they wanted us to pay to promote those types of posts, which is not something that we've gotten terribly involved in, the pay for promotion part of it. I'm a little bit old school, where if I can't get some proof of monetization, I'm reluctant to put our toe very far into the water with that. But about 2 weeks ago, Mark Zuckerberg, maybe it's 10 days ago, came right out and said that they are making some changes to hopefully make the user experience better on Facebook, and essentially that the business pages were going to get suppressed. And we have certainly seen this accelerate. And how are we going to respond to that? My answer is I don't really know. One of the things I feel a little bit bad about that I expressed to both Bruce and Therese, usually you call into a webinar and you get an expert. And I think I probably know more about this than the average guy on the streets, but I'm certainly no expert in social media. And I've frequently grown kind of skeptical of people who put themselves out there as an expert in social media. I think often the emperor has no clothes. So I'm not going to tell you that I've got all the answers. There's a gentleman who I follow fairly closely who I think is pretty dialed in, and he posted a blog post recently where he encouraged his clients to stop posting any organic content whatsoever on Facebook because he said you're basically just wasting your time. I don't think I would go that far. We certainly have not throttled back too much on our organic posts, but we have seen that the traffic that they are driving is less and less. So in terms of our internal resource allocation, I mean mostly that's staffing. It's the time that we put into things. We certainly are considering moving some of that time off of Facebook and onto things such as Instagram and Pinterest. And I think Instagram and Pinterest, and we can talk more about this later, are a little bit more challenging for a publisher because it's, for us, we can post beautiful images of rosaries or jewelry that we sell or religious art that we sell. And in a visual medium, they can be very compelling and they can drive sales. Certainly, some book covers are very beautiful, and the book covers will certainly drive sales, but it's probably not as rich a vehicle, for publishers in terms of promoting their products. But I think you can still get brand awareness out of those. I think you still can build community out of those. But the world is changing fast, and Facebook is thing. I think everybody needs to remember this. Your web page, like I'm staring right now at our company's Facebook page. This is not our page. Okay, this is Facebook's platform, and we have kidded ourselves around here in the past where we think that we own this, we control this. Not so much. We are playing in Facebook's sandbox, and the rules are their rules, and they can and do change them regularly. So I'd also urge all of you to think about your own pages as vehicles to drive people onto your own platforms, platforms that you control. Certainly your email lists. I think, driving people off of social media and onto your email lists is a big thing, onto your own website. If you can build up, forums or communities, small communities on your website, I think that it's preferable to Facebook.
Thank you. What about I know that there's been a lot of movement for people using using Facebook as a platform for the applications that they have, so that you don't have to invest all the money, in a sense, and the resources in creating it yourself. So for example, using Facebook Live. Do you see a place for that?
I think Facebook Live is an interesting area, and what I don't know is, again, the changes to how they are presenting things into their news feed, how that is going to impact Facebook Live. We've had good success to date with Facebook Live. I think video So there's two questions really here that I'm hearing. One is about Facebook Live. It is a very simple technology to get a lot of eyeballs onto video that you're producing. So yes, using their platform for you to recreate that on your own site would be, I think it would be expensive. But I don't know what the future holds. We've had things, we've done things as simple as praying a rosary on election day, for God's will to be done. And we've had tens of thousands of people that have participated in that rosary. Now, can I tell you we got a single sale out of it? I can't. But like all of the publishers who are on this call, our world is part business and it's part ministry. And so, I think about that a lot. And I think that that's something that those of us on this call, it's a challenge for us because, the bottom line is we all do run our profit and loss statements at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, end of the year, and they matter. Can you keep employing people and can you keep growing and do you have money for advertising? But at the same time, this isn't a widget factory around here. I got into this because I wanted to impact people. So there's a real ministerial component. And so praying the rosary on Facebook Live, again, I don't know that it impacted our profit and loss statements one iota, but from a ministerial standpoint, it's something that we thought was important. So how that's going to go going forward, I'm not sure. Is that going to be choked off along with other organic posts? My sense is that it probably will. The other part about that is that we've had some success with using the live video within private Facebook groups, and I don't know how much members of the Association of Catholic Publishers are doing this, but when a person joins a private group on Facebook, they see virtually everything. And so these can be much smaller. And these could be things where people are basically opting in to participate in something that you're doing. And it could be a Lenten devotion. It could be, for a book that you're coming out with, a little bit of a guided book club around these things, and you create a private page. And we've used Facebook, for us, the number of people who participate in these things is much, much smaller, but they may be a much more engaged user. So we've had some success within the private forums. And I think that's something that I would really encourage people to play with and test. There's not any downside. You can take the group down at any time. But so far, we're not seeing Facebook choking off engagement with private groups.
Thank you. Also, to our participants, viewers, want to remind you again that using the chat window in the GoToWebinar control panel, you may address some questions to the entire audience as well as for James. I want to extract or abstract a little bit from just the Facebook side of things. That one of the things I think that's raised a lot, expressing reticence about working with social media, is that soon after you begin, there's all this change that occurs. You just perfect your Flickr account, and then Instagram's all the rage. You start connecting with young people on Facebook, and then their parents and grandparents have moved in, and they've moved to Snapchat. What do you talk to leaders about when it comes to change in social media? How do you handle all that change? Any assistance for us?
Yeah, I can't stay on top of it, and so Snapchat was a big subject around here. We have quite a few younger employees who utilize Snapchat. We have a Snapchat account. I paid very little attention to it. It was clear that it had not arrived for our demographic. Our typical customer, 65% of our customers are women between the ages of 35 and 55. And I didn't see a lot of evidence that there was widespread adaptation, movement over to Snapchat. But platforms come and platforms go. One of my older kids, who is 28, was reminding, my kids go from 28 down to 8, and he was reminding us how draconian we were when he was in middle school, when we made him close out his MySpace account. So my Facebook was totally a secondary phenomenon to MySpace, and MySpace is virtually gone. So they do change. I thought it was interesting the number of platforms that people were involved in. I think it's probably, you certainly want to claim your turf in each of those areas. You want to protect your brand name, those kinds of things. You want to have some small presence, but I think it's better to do a little bit more with less. Pick the 2 or 3 that are really important to you, that are within your demographic, that you can handle with your staffing adequately, and really get to know those better than going too wide. And it's better to know a lot about a few things than to know a little about a lot of different platforms. I heard a comment once about technology that I think you could apply to social media, and that's that, for those of us who are not running big companies, big companies with lots of resources, that you want to be second generation technology. You want the big boys to go out and skin their knees, big falls, spend lots of money, and you want to sit back and watch what they do, and then be in the second generation that moves in, at a more cost effective and time effective, and learn from other people's mistakes. And that's kind of where we've been. I cannot tell you that you've got the guy in this webinar who's always been on the cutting edge of these things, because we have not. Our modus around here is a lot of times to watch what seems to be working for similar companies to us that are in different spheres. So while I do pay attention to what people are doing in the Catholic arena, I spend a fair amount of time looking at companies that are similar, that are in a niche, in a niche market, that do a really good job within that niche market. And what are they doing that's working for them, and what might apply to us? We look hard at similar types of demographics as well, but we're not first movers around here, and it's very hard to stay up on this. It's very hard.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. That's also probably a good segue. I have a couple of slides be interested in throwing up for some folks to just reflect on, and then we're going to ask you about it a little bit, about the whole sense of planning in this work. Luckily, we moved on from that sense of, why are we getting into this? Well, because everyone else is, and we wanted to move along with that. But to thinking about it in terms of what's the best strategy through which we can achieve our goals. It's a type of, I used to love it, thou shalt not put thy cart before thy horse. And by that, it's simply the sense it's the horse that is the driver of the purposes and goals. The cart is just the tools. And so many times in the past, people have just jumped on the tools, and often to find out that, they were here and then they were gone, without taking the time to think through the purposes and the goals that they had. What were they trying to do? Are you trying to provide information? Are you trying to provide inspiration? Are you just trying to communicate? And letting that drive your choice in terms of some of the tools that you use. So the positive way of saying that probably is, thou shalt plan, to think through, why digital? Or like James just said, I think let somebody else have handled some of the failure pads, and we can reap the benefits of that. What do you hope to accomplish? Who are you trying to engage? How often are you going to post an update? What kind of resources do you have to use that? Because I want to come back, circle around to that, James, to ask you about how much resources and you have in terms of some of the people that have to keep track of this. But and how are you going to measure your success, especially, as you said, in a field where we're also in ministry. I go to some geeky web conferences sometimes, and there is a British web expert named Sarah Parmenter, and in one of the talks, she put up these 2 slides that I'm showing you, where the first is she described what she called the basic social ecosystem. And I love that idea of, in the center of it all is your persona and your tone of voice, to really clarify that, solidify that, get that down, know what that is, so that it permeates your communications. But then she looked at some of the different channels that have different purposes along those purposes question and goals. What are the publishing channels? What are the aspirational or inspirational channels? What channels are you going to use for support? Particularly if you're in a business type environment and you have to support users or people who are doing things, how do you follow up? What channels are good for following up? And in her talk, I don't know how many fashionistas are out there, but in her talk, she used Warby Parker, the probably more than I can afford glass people, eyeglasses, and used these examples that I put here in the purple. Whereas she saw out of her work with Warby Parker, they would use things like their website, their blog, Tumblr, Facebook for their publishing channels. Is aspirational and inspirational channels would be things like Instagram, Tumblr, Facebook, Twitter, We Heart It, Pinterest. And you'll notice some of these come up in multiple times because they can fulfill different goals. Support, Twitter, email, phone, basic ways you have to get back to people to support them, and follow up through Facebook and Twitter and the email campaigns, which I do believe was a premature death claim on email, because I think that email does work a lot for folks. But I like this idea of a social ecosystem and that sense of being able to focus in on the purposes and goals and then following up with the tools. James, what is how does that read to you? Does that make sense with some of your experience?
I think that's an excellent slide. And Warby Parker is a company that I think is really doing a good job with these kinds of things. Now, they're venture financed. They have, to people like me, people probably on this webinar, have almost limitless resources. But I think that's an excellent slide. And I think you do. So I think the lead-in here, the lead-in question was about planning. And I think you do have to know what your goals are for this and what's realistic. And, one of the things that I've noted is that as a Catholic retailer, because at our core, we're a Catholic retailer, okay? I don't have the brick and mortar on Main Street, but we're a retailer, and so we're competitive. We're competitors with the Catholic retailers who do have the brick and mortar, and I like to think that we're a friendly competitor. I actually want them to succeed and thrive. I think that one of the overall problems we have is that the whole marketplace, the entire Catholic marketplace, has become very weak, and I don't think that's good for anybody. I think the overall profile of our products is so low. So when I hear about a Catholic bookstore that's closing down in Ohio or in Illinois or New York, it doesn't make me happy. I don't say, oh, I won that one, because I don't think I did win that one. I think it's bad for the market. And I think who has won that is Amazon. We're pretty insignificant in the big scheme of things with a player like Amazon. But the way I should approach social media is very different from that Catholic bookstore in Cincinnati, Ohio, okay? And I think that they're making a mistake if they try to approach it like a larger online retailer, and I'm making a mistake if I'm viewing it as a local community. So you got to figure out what your objectives are. So for a publisher, I think you certainly want to have awareness of your overall work. You want to have an awareness of your overall titles and your authors. I think you want to build some community around the types of publications that you have. So you've got some publishing companies that are very focused on the religious education market. You've got some that are doing more of the trade publications, the kind of more accessible things for the typical Catholic community. So where do you live, and how do you want your social media to work for you? And the one thing I'd say about planning, if my staff back here or listening in here, they laugh when they hear about me and planning, because I'm typically a guy that I like to test things. So I get accused all the time of ready, shoot, aim. I shoot sometimes before I aim. But I think I'm not a publisher, but I know people in publishing. I think a lot of times people in publishing are it's detailed work. It's really detailed work. And so you're shooting for perfection. You don't want to see errors in the text. You don't want to see these big mistakes that are going to cause problems with parent runs. But I think that sometimes it can lead to almost a paralysis. And you can't have paralysis. And one of the beauties of social media is that you can test things, and you can test to see what resonates. So, we've done that all the time. I mean, does a certain type of an article seem to resonate? Do images resonate? We found out what doesn't resonate. If we just sit here with our social media and just blast $19.95 for this book or $29.95 for this rosary, it goes nowhere. It's just like me watching a basketball game last night. Every time a commercial comes on, I mute for 90 seconds until the game comes back on. So we've become pretty lightly commercial in terms of what we're doing. I'd say that, I don't know, maybe 10% of our posts are expressly commercial. So for us, it's really about brand awareness. But on top of that, one of the things I wish we were in an environment where everybody could speak up and give their opinions. But I think one of the hard parts about this arena that we live in is that most businesses exist to scratch an itch. All right, so the person's got an itch. They're 50 pounds overweight, and they start looking for a gym to lose weight or nutritional supplements or whatever. We live in a world where people have an itch, okay, but they're so poorly formed they often don't know what is causing the itch. Okay, so they feel like they don't have a relationship with God. They feel like they're distant from their spouse. They're scared about raising their kids in an increasingly complex and frankly difficult environment. So they've got this itch, but they're not even formed or educated well enough to know that the Catholic publishers or the Catholic company or my competitors, we have the answer to a lot of their problems. It's interesting. I thought about this before this call. I have a lot of gratitude to the people on this call. I was raised in a lukewarm Catholic environment. I always jokingly refer to my childhood as being Roman Quaker. My mom was a convert from the Quaker Church, and you could take the girl out of the Quaker Church, but you couldn't quite take the Quaker Church out of the girl. And my dad was a lapsed Methodist who became Catholic because my mom made him. So, I didn't know my faith until my wife's conversion in her 20s through the very books that the people on this call publish. So, I had an itch, and your products scratched the itch, but man, it was not a real direct road to the products. It was a circuitous thing that involved a lot of, God's providence in the journey. But I'm really grateful, and the products that the people on this call sold really changed my life, changed my wife's life, changed my 9 children's life. And if we really believe what we say we believe, it's a change that's for all eternity. It's not some pill that I take that maybe I lose 2 extra pounds this week only to gain back, 3 weeks from now. The changes can be eternal changes. So our work is really important. And so a big focus for the Catholic company is the education of our customers. We put up a lot of stuff that is what I would call softly catechetical. Why do we have holy days of obligation? How should you prepare for Lent? How should you spend your Lent? How to be a better parent? How to be a better spouse? And we do it in a fairly soft way. That's our voice. Back to Bruce's slide about Warby Parker. You do have to decide what your voice is. And we've made a decision around here that we're not real polemic. I don't focus upon the issues that maybe divide people on this calls, where one person, thinks this way, another person thinks this way. We try to kind of shoot for the things that are core essential Catholic teachings, and we don't pick fights. It's not. I have far more important things to do than that. I think there's a lot of things in the church that I cannot influence. Okay, I am not the Pope. I am not a cardinal. I am not a priest. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a writer. I'm not a great thinker. Okay, I'm a marketer who loves the church, and so that's my wheelhouse. So I don't pick fights. But if we can help to educate people, I think they will buy more products from us. They will buy more products from our competitors. They will buy directly from the publishers. And I think there's an element of the profile of our marketplace is so low that the rising tide can rise everybody's boat. I wish we didn't think so much about how we compete with each other, and we thought about really the secular forces that are chewing away at our businesses. I'm not sure, this is a little bit of a rant, but I'm not a business historian, but I'm not sure we've ever lived in a time where so much of our country's commercial ongoing happening activity was controlled by 4 or 5 companies. I mean, I think everybody needs to think about that. Amazon, Google, Facebook, probably Apple to a lesser extent. I think about how far we've come, where I have warm and fuzzy feelings about Walmart, where 10 years ago I was worried that Walmart, now I look at Walmart as the little guy who's trying to fight the fight, against Amazon. the marketplace is being eaten by behemoths. People, I laugh because people come up and say, "Oh, you guys for a Catholic retailer are so large." And first of all, we're not very large. And I had a vendor tell me in a joke, he said, "You're the tallest amongst the pygmies." Well, we're pretty small, and it does me more good to band together with other Catholic retailers or with Catholic publishers to try to educate our clientele, and hopefully we'll all do well from that. But you got to know what your voice is going to be, just like that Bruce's slide, which was excellent. What is your voice, and what is the primary thing you're trying to do? For us, it's to educate, and to inspire, and to create community.
Thank you. Actually, there's a couple of questions that have come up. They've come up on in the question side. One is a very concrete thing, Lisa. The author or the speaker that originated the Warby Parker slide was a British woman named Sarah Parmenter. I believe it's Parmenter. Yeah, she's in the web business. Although branched out to create blow dry bars, blow dry hair salons in London. And one time was telling the story how she got that going on the web, also building community. Another question that came up is, and this one I'm going to ask to James, which best practices are most useful for faith-based organizations? You mentioned about building or connecting with people on a faith level. Not necessarily just the selling of things. So maybe to expand on that, do you find certain channels are better than others for trying to promote that kind of conversation or that kind of connection with people for faith?
Yeah, certainly for us historically, now recent history, 4 or 5 years, 6 years maybe, Facebook has been a good channel for this. Again, I think that this is increasingly under duress. So they are throttling back posts. On my other screen here, I've got my Facebook page, and they're following some sort of an algorithm where I think fairly early in a post history, if it's not getting much engagement, they're squeezing it back. So, we had a post yesterday that I think was a fine post with fine content, and it got nowhere. I mean, it got, maybe we've got 600,000 plus followers, and they've got 30, 40 likes, and got very little shares. And it's clear to me it got throttled back. Other things got some legs, 1,200 likes and a lot of comments on another post. So I think you've got to experiment and try different things and figure out what your community is, what's resonating with them, and try to give them more of that in terms of exposure. So what kind of best practices? I think you need to be consistent. You need to decide, what are we going to do? Are we going to post 3 times a week? Are we going to post once a day? Are we going to post, once a week? Whatever you're going to do, stick with it. And then I would be testing. I think that's a best practice. I think that you.
Hello, it's Trace Brown speaking.
Hello, Trace.
Oops.
Sister Myrna.
So I think you. No problem. I think you have to be consistent, and I think you have to be set up as one of, your standard operating procedures to have a testing mindset and to kind of be always looking at what is working and what's not working, and being kind of ruthless about paring off the things that aren't working for you. I think that that's really important. I think that, the paralysis is a common thing. This is a quote I've heard a lot around here. We use a lot around here, and it's been attributed to Thomas Aquinas. I don't think it's Thomas Aquinas, but it's, perfection is the enemy of the good. And, if you sit here and you always want to have the perfect post or the perfect blog article or the perfect image, you're going to accomplish nothing. You got to, I am constantly lecturing our staff about sometimes B+ is good enough. If we can be at a B+, then we will work to get to an A-, and then we will work to get to an A. I'm not willing to go out there with C or C+, but I'm not trying to be perfect. I'd rather accomplish, something every single day than rather than try to be perfect every single day. So have a testing mindset and figure out what works for you. You've got to get used to the tools that the social media platforms give you. Facebook is pretty rich in terms of the data that they give you, and you've got to dive in. And one of the things that I'd encourage. I don't know exactly who's on the call. I'm sure we have some people who are writers, and we have some people who are editors, and some people who are marketing directors, and some people who run publishing companies. But whatever your role is, I think you need to dig in and do some stuff yourself. I think that I'm always amazed that I was at a lunch last week that was kind of an e-commerce industry lunch. And I was talking to people who were in my position with companies that tended to range from a little bit smaller than us to quite a bit larger than us. There was a $1 billion a year company there, and then there were other companies that were maybe a third the size of us. And I was shocked by how many CEOs don't actually dig in and use the analytics tools. I think you have to, right? I think you can't, your customers are telling you something in the data that you can get from Facebook, from Instagram. And you can't be afraid of that. Most of us, I'm a lawyer. My background is as a lawyer, and I went to law school. And law school, when I was there in the late 80s, was largely people who studied liberal arts and didn't know what to do with their lives. They did pretty well in school. They went to law school. So this was not a bunch of this. The 200 people in my class were typically not statisticians or mathematicians. But the math's not complicated. You got to get into the data a little bit, because your customers right now on your company's Facebook page in the analytics tool, there is information that is actionable for you. And I would say don't delegate it to somebody in your company. Dig in yourself and play with it. I've run my own ad testing campaigns, that take a little bit of funny money, and I'll test things. I'm in Google Analytics every single day. Every day. I'm in it personally. Now we have a full-time person who that's what they do is analytics, but I'm in there myself because the customers are telling us things.
Excellent. Do you so does it overall take a lot of resources of personnel and time, or is it kind of thing that once you kind of get up to speed on knowing the interfaces that are in there and everything, you can go in, you can get the information you need and spend the time more on the thinking through what am I going to do with it?
I think it really just depends. First of all, it depends on your company's size, your entity's size. It depends on what kind of financial resources. Even within the Catholic publishing world, everybody's not the same. You've got, I know of a not-for-profit publisher that's excellent, but they have a fairly large foundation behind them. They've got resources that I could only dream of. You've got other entities that are really struggling. So to go out and hire a full-time social media thing might not be the most prudent thing. I've gotten burned on moving too fast with things before. So when we started with this, we probably took 25% of an existing employee's time. And, for us, it's been just a slow, methodical march. And at this point, we probably have 2 full-time equivalents who work in what I would call the social media and then the content generation space. So far beyond just Facebook. So our companies, our blog, for example, which we get a lot of traffic. So is a blog social media? Well, I think it is. I think it's, and it's a platform, frankly, that I like because we control it. It's not on somebody else's, they're coming to our site for it. And it's very heavily visited. And I think it's the gift that keeps on giving because, like right now, I can pull out my phone and I can literally go to my analytics app and I don't have it open yet, but I'm positive now it's open. So right now on my site, we have 8 people who are on an article that I know for a fact we wrote 5 years ago. There probably is never a time, 24 hours a day, that we do not have people on this one particular article, and we sell products off of it almost every single day. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Whereas Facebook, I have no earthly idea, what they're going to do with me in the future. I don't control that platform. So for us, we do a lot with our blog. We update, content several times a week, and are actually probably going to get, a little bit more granular in terms of how we handle things with our own content production. So we have, as a frame of reference, we have probably about 55, 56 full-time equivalent employees. It's probably like 62, 63 with part-timers. And we've got probably 2 full-time equivalents, maybe 2.5 full-time equivalents who just work with social media and content generation. And then, I post things, I've got a teenage daughter who posts things for us on our Instagram site. She does a good job with it. She's technically not on my payroll. So it extends beyond there. So maybe a little bit more than that, but just, start small and then test and see where it goes from you. But I would also say, make sure you're getting something out of it. All right. If people have 2 words that I think about a lot with respect to our social media, and I'd urge you to write these 2 words down. Vanity metrics. Okay, vanity metrics. I have been seduced by what we describe as vanity metrics. How many? I'm on my Facebook page. How many followers do we have? I think that meant something a couple of years ago. I think right now it's a vanity metric. And so if people on the call want one piece of tangible advice that they can go to right now, go to your advertising page on Facebook and stop any advertising that is driven to increase your follower count. You are getting nothing out of it. If you're spending $10 a day or $50 a day or $100 a day, in my opinion, you're wasting $10 or $50 or $100. Those days are over, and all you're doing is you're driving a vanity metric. Focus a lot more upon the engagement you're getting on your pages. If you're advertising, focus on advertising that is meeting some metric, driving revenue to your website, driving awareness of your authors, of your titles. But stay away from vanity metrics. That's when I get seduced by sometimes. How many Instagram followers? How many this? How many that? I think that those days are over.
There was today's Washington Post just had an article about it was actually the Richard Roper, the movie critic in Chicago, as an example of people who are paying for getting followers. That there are companies now, I guess bots that are going to generate large numbers of followers. So the number is becoming more and more meaningless.
I think that's particularly a problem on Twitter. I think there's been a lot in the last week regarding Twitter with this, where you're paying to get followers who aren't really followers. Now on Facebook, it's different. You can put an ad up that's very Catholic, and I've seen ads where follow us if you love the Catholic Church. Okay, so those are real people who are following you. But see, Facebook, if you're not engaging with those people, Facebook is throttling them back. They're not seeing your posts. So I think you're wasting money. I think that is where the world changed. We did a fair amount of advertising for followers at one time. We're now not doing any advertising for followers, or we better not be. I don't think we are. But the world has changed there. So go for engaging, content that's going to inspire and educate and promote your authors, your titles. People aren't going to buy your books if they don't understand that they need them. How it's going to change their life. It's the old thing. Sell the benefit, not the feature.
Okay. We don't have a whole lot more time left, so I want to again invite our viewers and participants get on the chat box or the question box. I'm watching both of them, and we've just got something coming right up here that we can address here. So let me. Okay, who is it? In fact, I was going to make a comment that you got to love a presenter who can pull up his phone and get right onto something. And the question says, can James talk a bit more about the analytic tool that he just opened on his phone? Where is the blog post in relation to the product? Was that on your website and you were using a Google Analytic, or was it in one of the social media?
Yeah, so I was using Google Analytics. There are better analytics platforms that you have to pay a fair amount of money for that I'm just not willing to do. Google Analytics is pretty good, and it gets continuously better. The other thing is, if you're not, and I'm not an analytics expert, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm a 7. Again, I'm a liberal arts undergraduate lawyer, so I took college calculus and struggled to I want to say I got a B-, but I may have gotten a C+, and I'm not sure I learned a whole lot. So I'm not a mathematician. I'm pretty good with basic, kind of practical math and practical statistics. it was the Google Analytics app. And I pulled it up. I can see how many users I have on my site right now. 55% are from desktop, 32% are from mobile, 12 are from tablet, and I can see where they're living in terms of our content. I can see how long they're spending on our site. It's a great tool, and I check in on that probably 3-4 times a day, much to my wife's chagrin. 7 days a week. She wants me to put it away on Sundays and Christmas and Easter, and I can't really help myself with it. But there's a lot of interesting data that's on there. The desktop environment is richer, but I think that I want a lot of people in our organization living with that and learning, because the customers are telling you something. You see pages that people are abandoning. It's important, but that's Google Analytics.
Okay, and there was another question has popped up here. So are the products listed or linked within the blog to your website? For example, you were talking.
Our blog follows the same kind of voice and the same sort of, again, back to an earlier question in an earlier slide, what do you hope to do with this? Well, for us, it's to educate, and it's to inspire and to develop a sense of community. So we are, even on our blog, we are not overly commercial, but certainly if we are talking about Prayer Life, we will embed links to products that we are selling. We will occasionally, within our rhythm, again, probably 10 to 15%, we will have book reviews, we will have product reviews. We do video, vlogs, vlogs with authors. We've had Father Leo Padawangham in here. I'm blanking on the gentleman's name, but wrote the book Drinking with the Saints, which is a book we sold thousands of copies of. So we hope to get more and more authors who are in here, and we put that into a blog post. And those things, again, you get some immediate traction, but they keep on living. And so the blog has worked well for us. It is not we haven't monetized it as well as I would like, but it does drive a lot of traffic and an increasing amount of traffic. And again, I control the platform. Like, I have absolutely no faith in what Facebook's going to be in 6 months or 9 months. I can't control it, and that makes me nervous. Little vignette here too, just to bring up. This got out a little bit in public. We didn't hide it, but our Facebook page was stolen in June. We had built up 500 and some odd thousand followers, and somebody sent an email to an employee here saying, we need you to change your password. There's been some security issues. And they went in and, didn't intend to, but they entered the password, and basically it was, some guy we think in the Ukraine who went and proceeded to steal 5 different Facebook pages from us. I can't remember what he turned, the Catholic Company Facebook page, he turned into something else. We were able to get it back, but it took us a month. And to be totally honest, that month where we didn't have it, he basically destroyed our algorithms because he was posting different things on there, and he wasn't getting any engagement. So it took us several months to kind of get the engagement back once we got our page back. And Facebook could care less that our page was stolen. They just did not care. I mean, probably 100 Facebook pages are stolen a day. You can't call them. There's form submissions. They never once responded to our form submissions. And the only way we got it back is a friend of a friend of a friend knew somebody at Facebook, and we did an end around in, and we knew who had stolen our page. But it was sheer luck that we got the thing back. And I think that there was, in some of the Catholic communities, about 2 or 3 weeks later, there were another number of other pages that people didn't know if they had been stolen or if Facebook had shut them down. There's been some of that from a political standpoint. Facebook is not some deeply Christian organization. And there were some that they were suppressing. So, Facebook, you don't own it, you don't control it, you control your blog, you control your website. There are some people who are doing great stuff with forums. We haven't gotten involved in forums because I think if you're going to do a forum, you better be monitoring the forum. You got to monitor them. You get people posting all kinds of crazy stuff, and I don't have faith that we would monitor that. But I think that that's an environment that could work for a publisher, is a forum. each of the publishers on here probably they can identify, they have some really passionate customers. And so don't be afraid of surveying those customers. What would you like to see from us? You know, how can our social media work help you in your faith journey? And those kinds of questions, not only will you get actionable answers from, but it's amazing how much customers want to know you care about them and their opinions. And they do have something to say.
Last question that came up here was, is the blog contained on your website, or are you using a different platform for blogging as opposed to?
Yeah, it resides on our website as a file. It is a WordPress. It is a WordPress blog that we have customized. Now ours, if you go on our website, you know, we private labeled it. So the brand for the blog is Get Fed. You know, the tagline is Feed Your Faith. So rather than the Catholic Company blog, and Get Fed's taken on a little bit of a life of its own. You know, we've got tens of thousands of followers. We have a social media platform for Get Fed. We have tens of thousands of followers. I think one of the things that we have not done well is, you know, we haven't crossed, you know, I think there are people who really love Get Fed and they don't think of it as being part of the Catholic Company. So I think that's something we've got to get better at, making sure that it's a co-brand. People understand that as a service of the Catholic Company that we're providing. I think that private label thing, I think it's worked pretty well for us. I don't know that that's what everybody should do. There is some brand diffusion when you do that, but I think sometimes just putting something out there as your blog, you know, our Sunday Visitor has done a bunch of this. They have some new content that's out there under, you know, I don't know if they think of it this way, but it is a separate brand. You know, EWTN, for example, now owns Church Pop. So it's a way of expanding your platform a little bit. The downside is I do think that there is some brand diffusion, and none of us live in a world where we have brands like Apple or Facebook, you know, where we're just, you know, constantly on the tip of everybody's tongue. So you got to think through that one carefully for yourself as to whether or not you want that brand diffusion. And I can give you 5 reasons for why that's worked for us, and I can give you 5 other things that maybe it wasn't the best call. So it's not positive.
Thank you. I want to move toward our conclusion. So I will come back to you, James, in a second for a final thought. But we're going to launch one last poll to folks asking a kind of a quick, immediate feedback on the webinar itself. How much it assisted you in finding your way or confirming what you knew. Coming up on 80%, 84, last couple folks, and then we'll close. I'm going to close in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Close that, and we'll share that. So no one said not at all. Very, very good. 25% helped you somewhat. 69% it has been helpful, and 6% it helped very much. And to that end, I'm going to remind you in a second about the evaluation/interest finder that'll come up. Only 3 questions once we close the webinar. So that'll give you a chance to name some additional things that you would maybe like to see for future. James, any last thoughts to you?
Yeah, just a couple things, and then I'm going to give one more suggestion. Is, you know, I think back, figure out what is your voice, what is your goal. Don't be afraid of testing and trying things. I mean, I think people aren't going to survive in the future if they're not innovators. So don't be afraid to innovate. Look at social media as a platform for you to test and try things out and to be an innovator. And the final thing is analyze what's happening. And on the analyzing, another word for you to write down, because I think everybody needs to do some research on this, is, in other words, attribution analysis. This is a tricky area, and if something people need to be very careful about. If you are analyzing things, the numbers you're seeing aren't always exactly as you think they are. So I'll give you an example. This morning we sent an email out as a company to drive product sales, right? So a couple 100,000 people got this email. Today, several 100,000 people are going to be engaging with us via social media. Monday, we had a catalog go in home. So the person got the catalog on Monday, they got our email this morning, and they saw our social media posts today. Tonight, they get down and they decide they're going to buy something from us, and what do? They go to Google and they click on an ad. They don't click on an organic, they don't type Catholic company in there, they click on an ad. And so what happens? Who's getting credit for that sale? And attribution analysis is really tricky. And if you're working with an agency for your social media, they'll tell you, listen, you spent $1,000 last month or $10,000 last month, and we got you $50,000 worth of sales. You got to be skeptical of what they're telling you. It's not that they're lying to you, but the metrics that they're using are very different from, say, what Google is doing for pay-per-click. Okay, is it a click-through or is it a view-through? Is it exposure? Is it a person who actually clicked on the Facebook post and then went and bought? You've got to get to where you understand the language of attribution analysis. My general sense is a lot of people in the Catholic world are getting burned on some of the money that they're spending because they don't understand the concept of attribution analysis. So if there's a takeaway, go do some research on attribution analysis. We are not experts on it. It is tricky. It's really hard, but it's forced us to tighten up our spend some, which I think has been good for us. And I hope that you'll figure out what your voice is, figure out what your goals are, and test and try things out, and then become better at your practices of analysis of what you're doing. Is it effective, and how to get more effective with it. And I really wish everybody the best of luck. I have a lot of affection for this community and for Catholic publishers. You folks have been really important to my company and to my family. And as a little side note, for years, we have thought our sales of books was going to decline with the strength of Amazon, and they are not. They're holding steady. Our sales for probably the last 7 years have been holding at 35% of our revenue comes from Catholic books. And every year I say it's going to drop, it's going to drop, it's going to drop, and it's not dropping. It's holding firm, and if anything, it may be growing a little bit for us. So your work is really important work, and I value what you do. And for those of you who we purchase from, thank you for all the support that you've given us over the years. And I'm really in your debt, and I'm very grateful for you.
Thank you. Before we adjourn, just please note the following. Recording of this webinar will be made available to you soon. You'll receive an automatic email from GoToWebinar alerting you, so you'll be able to come right on and take a look at that again, or direct some of the other folks in your organization. Please join us for the next webinar on how new revenue models can sustain and grow a Catholic publisher's business. And that's scheduled for Wednesday, April 11th at, again, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. So mark your calendars. Wednesday, April 11th, next webinar. Again, please take a moment to complete the 3 questions. As soon as I click this webinar off, they'll appear. And finally, thank you to our viewers and participants for joining us today, and a special thank you to our guest, James Hetzel. Really thanks. And my name is Bruce Baumgarten. On behalf of the Association of Catholic Publishers, peace be with you.